Good evening, my friends. Wherever you are watching from tonight, listen closely, because what we're about to unfold isn't just another headline. It's the sound of the world shifting its balance, one rocket crate at a time. In the dry heart of the Sahel, under a sky bruised with dust and heat, a quiet deal has just rewritten Africa's place on the global chessboard. They said the alliance of Sahel states was running out of options. They said sanctions would choke it, that isolation would humble it. But this week, a different story rumbled across the cracked tarmac of Wagadu International Airport. Cargo planes from the East gray, unmarked, efficient, descended one by one. And when their ramps dropped, the future of the AES rolled out in steel and silence. Inside those containers were not just weapons, they were symbols. Dozens of SR-7 rocket systems, Type 86 mortars, and modular launch vehicles marked Made in China. Technicians in plain fatigue supervised the unloading, while Burkina Faso officers stood beside them, notebooks in hand, not as subordinates, but as partners. To anyone standing nearby, the air felt heavy, like history being uncrated. This wasn't charity, it wasn't aid, it was a transaction born from respect, written in the hard language of capability. For the first time since the fall of French dominance in the region, the AES, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger had sourced its own lifeline. Not a grant, not a handout, but a deal. A deal that said, quietly but unmistakably, Africa will arm itself, train itself, and defend itself on its own terms. In Wagadu, Captain Ibrahim Traoré watched the operation from the command balcony. His face gave little away, but those who know him say he understands the weight of each decision. The young officer who once spoke of sovereignty as a dream was now shaping it in real time. Around him, AES officials exchanged brief nods. No speeches, no parade. Just the hum of forklifts and the scrape of chains against steel. It was the kind of moment that doesn't announce itself, it reveals itself later, when the world realizes what just changed. Western analysts will call it a provocation. They already are. Think tanks in Paris have labeled it China's creeping militarization of the Sahel. Washington calls it a strategic concern. But on the ground in Burkina Faso, the story sounds different. Farmers returning from the fields hear the distant thunder of new engines and say, maybe now the villages will sleep again. Mothers who have buried sons whisper that at last, someone is equipping the army, not lecturing it. Because for years, that's all Africa received: lectures about governance, democracy, and reform, spoken by voices that never heard the sound of insurgents at night. The West promised support and delivered conditions, promised protection and delivered bureaucracy. In that space between promise and pain, the AES was born a pact not of politics, but of survival. And tonight, survival just got an upgrade. The Chinese shipment, confirmed through satellite images and local reports, is the first major military transfer under the new Sahel Infrastructure Security Framework, a quiet clause signed last month between Beijing and the AES bloc. Officially, it covers training, logistics, and equipment modernization. Unofficially, it marks a line in the sand. The age of dependency has reached its limit. To understand why this moment matters, you have to look beyond the runway. Across the Sahel, from the Niger River to the borders of Chad, a silent transformation is underway. AES engineers are building joint command centers linked by fiber networks instead of foreign bases. Airfields once used by Western contractors are now controlled by regional forces. For decades, Africa's wars were outsourced. Now its defense is being insourced, one supply chain at a time. Still, power is a double-edged sword. With every new weapon comes a new question. Who holds it and why? Traore seems to understand that balance better than most. Weeks before the Chinese deal, he ordered the creation of the Burkina Faso Code of Conduct, a doctrine that fuses modern military discipline with traditional ethics. It begins with a single line: the rifle that guards the people must never aim at them. Those words are now painted on the gates of several army camps across the country. Even Beijing, pragmatic as always, appears cautious. Its defense attaché in Niamey was quoted as saying, "We sell capability, not ideology." For China, this is not about building puppets, it's about building partners who can stabilize their own regions and protect the trade routes of tomorrow. For Africa, it's about no longer asking for permission to do what every sovereign nation must. In the markets of Wagadu, the news spread faster than any official statement. Radios crackled with rumor that the AES had acquired surface-to-air missiles, that joint drills with Chinese advisors would begin within weeks, that the alliance was preparing something larger, perhaps a regional defense initiative codenamed Iron Dune. None of this is confirmed, but in a continent where rumors often precede reality, even whispers carry weight. The symbolism, however, is undeniable. When those first rockets were offloaded, they didn't just land on Burkina Faso soil, they landed on a century of colonial inertia. The same runways once used to export gold and cotton under foreign flags were now importing tools of self-determination. History, for once, was flying in the other direction. By dusk, the city was alive with conversation. Street artists painted murals of Traore beside the AES flag. The words, "Our defense, our destiny," scrawled beneath. At universities, students debated the implications of the deal. Some worried about over-reliance on Beijing, others saw it as a necessary evolution, but no one denied its significance. A generation that grew up seeing their armies depend on old alliances was now witnessing a new one born in their lifetime. The next morning, the official statement came short and simple. The AES has entered a defense modernization partnership aimed at restoring security and dignity to the Sahel. No mention of China, no mention of weapons, just that word dignity. And that single word may prove more powerful than any missile in the crates. In European capitals, the reaction was swift and uneasy. France issued a communiqué expressing deep concern over external influence. The EU called for transparency. The United States promised to monitor developments closely, but in truth, what unsettles them isn't the rockets. It's the realization that the monopoly on African obedience is slipping away. The AES is not aligning east or west, it is aligning inward toward itself. For decades, Africa's sovereignty was conditional, certified by external approval. That era is fading. A new model is emerging. Transactional pragmatism. You have resources, we have manufacturing.
You need stability, we provide systems. No sermons, no sanctions, just deals.
And while some fear this pragmatism could breed new dependencies, others see it as the first step toward balance in a world long tilted by power. Traoré has remained publicly silent about the details, but insiders say he views this as a bridge deal, a temporary partnership until local industry can produce its own hardware. He has spoken privately about creating a Sahel defense factory, a tri-national facility to build drones, vehicles, and ammunition domestically. If that vision materializes, the October shipment will be remembered not as an arrival, but as a beginning. Yet even beginnings carry warnings. History shows that the same power that liberates can also corrupt. The same alliances that bring strength can invite manipulation. And so the question rises from every street corner and village square. Can the AES stay sovereign while dealing with giants, or will the cost of self-defense become a new kind of dependence? Only time will answer. But for now, the air over Wagadugu hums with something the Sahel hasn't felt in decades: momentum. Across the border in Mali, Colonel Goïta has already pledged support for joint rocket training. In Niger, General Tiani has announced plans for shared command drills. The AES isn't just surviving isolation, it's building its own ecosystem inside it. Three nations once described as failed states are now behaving like architects of a new regional order. And somewhere in the desert, under the cold stars of the Sahel, a convoy of newly delivered vehicles moves quietly toward the front lines. Soldiers ride on top, not with songs, but with purpose. They know what those weapons represent: Not aggression, not conquest, but the possibility of finally fighting on equal terms. Western cameras will capture the hardware, analysts will chart the coordinates. But what they'll miss, what they always miss, is the pulse beneath the machinery. The look in a soldier's eyes when he realizes his country no longer needs to borrow courage. Because what happened this week in Burkina Faso is not just a military event, it's a psychological revolution. The AES is no longer asking who will protect it. It has decided that answer belongs to itself. And that decision, simple and quiet as it may seem, will echo far beyond the Sahel. In Nairobi and Accra, policymakers are watching. In Addis Ababa and Pretoria, discussions are shifting. The question spreading across the continent is no longer can we, but when do we start? As the sun sets over Wagadu tonight, the city glows under a new rhythm. The old neon signs of foreign embassies fade behind the dust, while the AES insignia shines on freshly painted command trucks. Somewhere, an engine starts, deep and steady, the kind of sound that marks the beginning of eras. They said Africa's time would never come. They said its alliances would always be dictated, not chosen. But the echo rising from the Sahel tonight tells a different story. The continent is writing its own manual, page by page, policy by policy, rocket by rocket. If you're listening right now, remember this moment. Years from now, when historians trace the dawn of a self-reliant Africa, they might not mark it with speeches or treaties. They'll mark it with the sound of those engines in Burkina Faso, the low rumble before sunrise, when sovereignty finally found its voice. So, wherever you are watching from, stay awake. Because this isn't just about rockets or politics, it's about a continent reclaiming the right to breathe on its own. The AES has struck its deal, the shipment has arrived, and the world, whether it's ready or not, has just felt the tremor of a new Africa rising. If independence still means something to you, don't just watch, walk with it. Subscribe, stay vigilant, and keep your eyes on the horizon. Because the next chapter of Africa's awakening has already begun, and its engines are still running.